Screw me on my bonus, make me do 2 jobs, enjoy the backwater you earned. Welcome back to They Did What? Your source for the internet's craziest, most entertaining stories, where I go over them, analyze them, and most certainly make fun of them. Today, going to hear a story titled, Screw me on my bonus, make me do 2 jobs, enjoy the backwater you earned. And guys, this story which I came across is about a guy. He's sharing his story about his experiences he had when he first started his career in the financial industry. And he got that job with the boss from hell. The type of guy who was related to some people on the board of directors, pretty much got to do whatever he wanted, took advantage of people, all that. And of course, this guy telling the story. Screws him on his bonus, amongst other things, and this guy worked his tail off. But this guy then gets some serious payback on the whole situation, how it was handled. And in the end, this boss who screwed him over royally gets it in the end. And that'll be a good one to go over here, guys, because I don't think there's anybody out here that hasn't had a boss they hated at some point in their life. And the type of boss you've even seen that takes full advantage of its people, screws them on their bonuses, pay, promotions, all that. So it's a good feel-good story, and for some payback for somebody that most certainly deserves it. Now, it's a little long, so I'll get right into it. It starts off, he says, I apologize for the length of this in advance. This happened some years ago, but it still seems relevant to today, so I thought I would share this story. So back in the 1990s, I was working for a European-based financial firm. There are U.S. offices managed by Europeans with regional head office in New York. Younger employees were generally underpaid and overworked, as in your first few years out of college, the promised reward was being promoted to a director position where the salary, perks, and bonus structure would really kick in. Kind of like how a law firm promotes their younger lawyers to partners after a long wait. That's pretty much how it goes. They work your tail off when you're young and you have the energy and you're motivated. As junior associates, the only good news was that we received the same 5 weeks of vacation per year, plus a few weeks of sick leave as our European counterparts, which for me meant a lot of camping and staycations during the summer, since I didn't really make enough to travel to exotic, expensive locations. The offices were set up in a way where the business development board of directors each had a junior associate. The BD guys would generally network, schmooze, and travel around their territories to meet clients and new prospects. Once back in the office, the BD guys would dump their meetings notes on the desk of their junior associates to follow up and land the business, aka Hunter-Skinner model. As a junior associate, I was pretty assisting a BD, so I routinely rolled over at least 2 weeks of vacation every year. I had worked at the firm for 3 years and was starting to get antsy for a promotion. Right after Thanksgiving, my boss in the West Coast office told me that I was being transferred and promoted to the Southeast office come New Year. I had really no interest in working and living in the Southeast, but I wanted to advance in my career. I rolled over my usual 2 weeks of vacation into the new year, or the next year, so I was eligible for 7 weeks of vacation that next year. After celebrating New Year's with my family in California, I packed up my car and drove across the country. Once in the new office, I settled in and met my new boss, who promptly informed me that he wasn't actually promoting me to director, though I was being given the responsibilities of the role as he judged me to be too young, but was also told that if I demonstrated that I could do the job, I'd be promoted next year. Well, that sucks. He drove across the country and thought he was going to be promoted, and guess what? No, never mind. And this is obviously the a-hole boss that he's talking about in the beginning. Well, what I'm telling you about. He says, I was pissed, but didn't have a choice other than moving back home and starting from scratch, so I agreed to it. I disliked my boss instantly, as coworkers told me he was flaunting his management perks, which consisted of large allowances for housing and automobiles, which were paid for by sales production from employees like myself. It turned out that he was related to the serving member of the board of directors back in Europe, which is how he got the job as regional manager. Everybody knew he didn't have the skills to do our job, so he just collected fat checks, went to expensive restaurants with friends, and billed to the company as client development, all the while leasing a new Mercedes every 2 years on the company's dime, while generally being a jerk to everyone who worked for him. There you go, guys. That guy, that manager. I'm sure many of you guys watching this know that type of guy, and you, believe me, wanted to see something happen to him. During the first week, I also met my junior associate, Jeremy. We sat down and discussed some accounts I'd inherited that were in backwater locations none of the directors wanted to visit. In other words, out in the freaking boonies. Jeremy was professional, but I got the distant impression Jeremy hated me, though I didn't know why. I started traveling around to meet my new clients and prospects over the next few weeks, usually spending at least 3 to 4 days on the road, back in the office on Fridays to go over follow-ups on business leads with Jeremy and execute whatever paperwork needed to be taken care of at the time. About a month later, I returned for one of my many trips, and I learned that Jeremy had quit. It turned out that he was mad that he'd been passed over for the position that he'd been given. I couldn't fault him, as I probably would have done the same thing. I asked my manager to hire someone else to back me up, but he was hesitant to do so, reasoning that my client portfolio was just starting out so I could do both roles until it made sense to staff up. Now he has to do this other dude's job. And what do you want to bet? There was plenty of room in the budget to hire somebody else, but this guy just didn't want to do it. Just screw this guy, maybe have more of a bonus come his way. I point out that it would be hard to be an effective business development officer if I had no support system to help grow my client portfolio, but he chose not to listen, knowing that I had little recourse but to shut the hell up. You just want to punch this boss. Alrighty. I spent the rest of the year working my ass off. This was right before email and internet were common, so executing business on the road was hard. He says fax machines were the bane of my existence. Even though laptops were reserved for directors, my boss was kind enough, and he says heavy sarcasm here, to let me use a company laptop on which I would handle all the paperwork to process client business from hotel business centers late at night or early in the evening, or early in the morning. So I learned to live on 5 hours of sleep or to sleep on planes whenever I could. So this guy is busting his butt. He is on his grind, busting his butt as a young guy should. Unfortunately, he's being taken advantage of, and you're going to see here. But just remember in the back of your head, guys, happy ending here. After dealing with problems from some irate clients, I eventually paid for my own personal cell phone. Not everyone had them back in the mid-90s, and our directors had just started getting company-paid phones that year, as I had to handle customers from the road. I just gave my personal cell number for clients to call so I could handle problems from the road. I landed a few big clients by a combination of luck and hard work and got some solid referrals, which led to more referrals, so within a few months I was gaining some serious momentum. This guy's good at his job. Since I didn't have an associate to help me out, that meant I spent the weekends and late nights back at the office, handling paperwork, and then back on the road during the week. I was so busy working both sides of the job that by December of that year, I hadn't taken my mandatory 2 weeks of vacation. I had some new clients that needed to be handled by the end of the year, so I was granted a vacation waiver, meaning that my 7 weeks of vacation would roll over into the next year, adding up to the 12 weeks of vacation plus sick time for the coming year. Good Lord, it's 3 months off. It was a big hassle for HR to process the waiver, but since I had produced a lot of new business, my manager was all too happy to order it done. I wasn't upset about working through the end of the year, though I flew back and forth to California for Christmas on a 24-hour turnaround. I rationalized it, hoping that it would get paid for the first big bonus of my career in a few months. At that time, European firms paid their bonuses in mid-April, while employees of the U.S.-based firms got their bonuses by the end of January. If you're planning on switching jobs early in the new year, working at a European firm meant that sometimes you left money on the table, aka golden handcuffs, so the timing of switching firms was important. I continued to work at my frantic pace through April, taking no vacation as I was bringing in more and more clients and digging myself out of paperwork when I wasn't on the road. In the new year, we had some meetings and scorecards and sales goals, and I led my office in some of the categories and was number one for overall production. This guy's awesome. He kicks butt. This guy's working his tail off. He's the type of guy that you would want to have on your team. A guy in his grind, ambitious, driven, hardworking, hardly sleeping, always on the road, focused. You think this guy could do this if he had a girlfriend or a wife and kid? Hell no. Will pay off eventually. Finally, in mid-April, my boss called me in and announced it was time to discuss my bonus and annual review. I eagerly sat down, licking my chops because I was assuming my bonus would be equal to my base salary at least, if not double. He handed me a piece of paper and it showed me a number that was almost 90% less than what I was expecting for my bonus. I literally laughed out loud and told him I was a little late. It was a little late for an April Fool's joke. But he wasn't smiling. He proceeded to tell me how proud he was of me, but that since I wasn't a director, the bonus that I received was the maximum amount he could give me, as there wasn't any money in the budget. Bullshit. I sat there in shock for a while, then kept asking the same questions in different ways. Basically, why did he screw me out of my bonus? Exactly, because this guy's a total jackass, total a-hole, spoiled, pampered. And of course, there was room in the budget for this, but this guy didn't care because he figured there's probably more money he could get for his bonus. It was like talking to a brick wall, despite pointing out to the scorecard that he showed me as the best producer in the office, all the while having no junior associate. He wasn't having it. I was crushing, but then he asked me if he was promoting me, and then I asked if he was promoting me to director since I had demonstrated that I could produce, hoping that title would be a gateway into a bigger payday the following year. He shook his head and replied, maybe next year, if you prove this year wasn't a fluke. It was a gut punch. So after all that busting his butt like he was doing, you all heard about this, he got 10% of what he thought he would get, and no promotion. And he has to keep on busting his butt to maybe he might get a promotion and maybe get a bigger bonus. What a load of crap. I'm sure some of you guys can relate to this. He also rationalized that while my review was positive, I had some flaws I needed to work on. Mainly that I didn't work very well in a team atmosphere. I reminded him that I was a team of one, so there wasn't anybody on my team to complain about me. A switch finally flipped in my brain as I realized I just got majorly screwed and there was no changing the outcome. I told him that I was feeling ill and would be taking some sick days, so I got up and left his office. Co-workers said I looked white as a ghost as I walked out of his office, so they knew something was wrong. I forwarded my incoming calls to his extension, packed up my important papers in case I decided to never come back, and then headed to my apartment in complete rage. You cannot blame this guy. And you couldn't blame him literally if he, outside the office, punched him in the face. But the guy keeps cool, calm, finds a way to get even. I called my family and told them I need to come home for some much-deserved vacation, so after drinking myself senseless for 40 hours and forwarding all my calls to voicemail, I called into work the following Monday and told my boss I'd be taking a vacation week. He was pretty angry about the short notice as he's been dealing with my irate clients contacting him about their problems since I couldn't be reached, and he didn't have much of a clue as to how to handle the paperwork necessary to do the work. So other associates were now being called in to help handle my workload. I'd say, tough crap, dude. You screwed me over. I'm taking my vacation. After all, I got 3 months worth plus sick time, which I didn't use because I was on the grind making you money. And you screw me over? I flew home and made a few calls to people I'd worked with, hoping for some job leads. I managed to grab a lunch with an old associate who had left the firm, and he gave me some ideas and contacts, so I spent the rest of my vacation looking for a new job. I knew the time sucked, so out of options, I went back to my job the following week. The first day back, I looked at my HR data, and I realized I still had 11 weeks of vacation to use that year, plus a few more weeks of sick leave. Around that time, there was a company-wide conference called to celebrate a big company milestone. He says, I think the firm was 125 years old, but I didn't care anymore. To celebrate the big anniversary, we're told we were getting an extra week of vacation that year, meaning once again I had 3 months of vacation to my account. As a high performer, I was also selected to spend a few weeks in New York during the summer and fall for some management training, so that meant additional time out of the office. And watch how this guy milks it for all it's worth, and it certainly is warranted. The next month was a blur of looking at different vacation options for me to take during that year. I had accrued a lot of hotel rental car points and frequent flyer miles during the past year traveling, so I spent my days in the office doing as little client work as I could get away with while spending the rest of my time on the phone with the frequent flyer hotel customer service reps, trying to squeeze out as much vacation on my miles and points as I could. By the end of May, I submitted my vacation request, which detailed how I was going to take 3 months of vacation in the 7 remaining months of the year. I submitted the forms to HR, and within a day, my boss called me to discuss my schedule as he realized I was basically going to be gone for almost 2 weeks out of every month for the rest of the year. He says I was wrapping up my vacations around federal and bank holidays whenever I could manage it. Good. After he went through, after he was screwed over, this is certainly warranted. He told me that he was rejecting my vacation schedule since there wasn't anybody to cover my clients in my absence. Oh yeah? Good luck getting away with that, pal. I asked him to call the HR rep into his office to have his stance officially on record. He objected, but I said I wouldn't discuss such matters without an HR representative present. Very smart, bro. Look what happens when you got nothing to lose, guys. HR was called in. My boss told HR he was rejecting my vacation schedule, but HR responded that I was legally entitled to take the vacation days, so he couldn't reject my request. I also told him that henceforth I wouldn't be handling any of my customers from my personal cell phone if I was out of the office, so I'd be forwarding my work phone to his when I was on vacation or doing some business development trips. Also, I told him I was going to Europe on 2 different trips and would be unable to be contacted since I didn't have a company-issued cell phone. He was pissed, but knew that unless he promoted me to director and issued me a cell phone, he couldn't do anything about my new stance. Awesome. So make this SOB work now. After that, I only did business development in areas where I like to travel and, more importantly, vacation. Until that point, I had always said yes to any meetings in backwater locations if it represented a chance to land a new client. Having learned my lesson the hard way, I didn't want any new clients to begin with, and certainly none living in areas I didn't like to visit. Trips to Florida became common. If I was traveling, I would typically spend Monday to Wednesday making very infrequent sales calls. Most of my schedule was falsified with fake prospects so I could spend afternoons playing golf or hang out at hotel pools trolling for women my age. Then would take off Thursday and Friday with vacation and sick days so I could hang out and have fun using hotel points to extend my stays for free. Since I was still underpaid, I ate cheaply and learned to squeeze as much out of my trips for the least amount of money I could, managing while still having fun. This guy's learning to milk the system, and again, it's warranted for what he went through. My boss was now irate with all the customer calls coming to him, but he refused to hire an assistant for me, so I kept forwarding my line to his when I was out of the office. You mean the boss has to work now? God forbid. Whenever I was back in the office, pretty infrequent at this point, he would routinely lambast me with verbal warnings about poor performance reviews, but I would just shrug my shoulders and tell him that maybe he was right not to promote me to director since I was such a disappointment. He was also pissed because he'd been commended for having such a high production office the year before, mostly courtesy of my efforts, and now he was getting a lot of heat from New York that his new client numbers were down. So this is making him look bad. Since I had frequent flyer miles and hotel points, but not a lot of money, I backpacked through Europe on 2 different 2-week trips this summer and also took a number of vacations back home, diligently following up on sales leads in the West Coast that I had cultivated whenever I was in the office. By October, I started to firm up some conversations with prospective employers back in California and finally received a concrete job offer in mid-November. Sweet. Now, truly, you can do whatever you want because you got an offer. I waited until December 15th to inform my boss I was quitting the firm and told him I'd be using my remaining 2 weeks of the vacation/sick leave so that my resignation was effective immediately. He was surprised I didn't wait until April to leave, but I laughed, telling him I knew he was going to screw me on my bonus anyway, so the money wasn't worth waiting around for. Isn't it amazing, guys, like I said, when you got nothing to lose? This guy had nothing to lose at this point, so he's like, screw you. He then asked me to stay through the end of January in order to give him enough time to hire and train an assistant or a replacement to handle my clients. Screw you, you've done nothing to help me. You've been screwing me out of everything since the beginning. I'm not going to give you any special favors, jackass. I refused, knowing that Jeremy had quit 20 months before so he had plenty of time to prepare for this eventually. As I was packing in my office and informing my coworkers about my departure, I got a knock on my door from the HR rep as he wanted to conduct an exit interview. Oh, this must have been fun. He closed the door and I aired out all my dirty laundry. I told HR the firm had lost me when my boss had screwed me out of my bonus, repeating the story that there wasn't any money in the budget. That's what his boss said. The HR counterpart shook his head and laughed at my boss's stupidity, knowing that since Jeremy had been an employee at the beginning of the year that I arrived, his salary and bonus was actually in the budget for the whole year. As such, my boss could have allocated that amount that he would have paid Jeremy to my bonus, which probably would have kept me reasonably happy. Instead, he decided to screw me over. See? There you go. The money was there. He just decided to screw him over, probably so he can get a piece of the money. I moved back to California that week and started a new job the first week of January. 3 months into my new job, I got a call from a coworker at my previous firm. He called to tell me that after I left, HR from the head office in New York came down early in the new year to interview my former coworkers. Apparently, my sudden departure had raised some eyebrows in New York as they viewed me as a rising star, and questions were asked Questions were asked why I left so abruptly. Apparently, other employees in my office had gotten screwed in various ways. Lots of client development meal expenses were rejected for being too expensive by the guy who was routinely billing his meals with friends to the firm. So after listening to all the complaints, the New York management decided to make a change years before he was due to be rotated back to Europe. Since he was related to the guy on the board, they couldn't fire him, so they reassigned my old boss to some backwater farm town. In Bumble F somewhere. I couldn't pronounce the town, but he was told it was the kind of place that doesn't provide perks like allowances for housing, accounts for expensive steak restaurants, or a new Mercedes. So this guy is going out to the middle of frickin' nowhere, and he can't enjoy all the perks that he milked for everything it was worth because he's related to a guy on the board of directors. This is probably punishment from God for this guy, this low life. Eventually, I started my own company 5 years back and worked out pretty well. Even though I got screwed 25 years ago, I always think about that experience fondly, as I probably would have worked for a company like that for my entire life if I had not been shown how companies and bosses will generally screw you over given half a chance. It was eye-opening and put me on a path to eventually start my own firm, and for that I'm forever grateful. I always think about the situation around New Year's to remind myself how far I've come and how not to treat employees. Hopefully some of you can benefit from my experience without all the drama I went through. Happy New Year. So there you go, guys. That's a nice feel-good story about a guy who got screwed over and eventually comes out on top. He got a better job. He got to enjoy, to milk everything for as much as it was worth for a while and stick it to that boss. And that boss, who's a total a-hole, got sent off in the middle of nowhere and couldn't enjoy the perks. He probably didn't last that long and probably went back to Europe, probably begging his relative in the board of directors to give him something better. But there you go. So if you are a boss and you're watching this, don't screw over your employees. You can be, if you got to be tough on them, that's one thing. But screwing them out of their bonuses and promotions and all that and taking advantage of them, not cool. And it could come back to bite you in the ass one day. Mark my words. Especially if you cause a rising star to leave. And good for this guy because he eventually started his own company and now he's raking in the money. But he learned, don't treat your employees like that. Employees are so important because you can't have the success you may want without good employees. And if you got to spend a little more money to keep them and everything, it's worth it. It's in your interest. But anyway, guys, that'd be a good one to cover there. I always like a good payback story. Somebody has it coming. All right, guys, that is it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let us think about this. You got a great story like to share, a crazy story or something very entertaining that would work, email me, strongsuccessful@gmail.com. I'll definitely cover it down the road. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.